The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have an interesting one for you today. It's just going to be Webster and he's going to talk about a brand new certification that he is heading up with NAILD. But before we jump into that, let me take a second to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And is financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com, where we've got all of our episodes, a news feed, merch store, training opportunities, and counsel on lighting control startup and integration. And there will be a link in that training opportunities for this as well. But we will also have a link in the description for this too. But yeah, so today this is an unsponsored episode, but I really want to focus on this because I think it's super exciting, and hopefully Ron will agree with me once he actually learns more about this. I've kept this a little bit under lock and key, so he gets to do the cold take with you guys on this podcast. But Ron, if I told you there was a certification coming out from NAILD on lighting controls, what would you say?
It's a great question, right? So, because NAILD is very focused on distributors, and where
Right.
I'm not in that distributor market, I may have a different take on it than other people, right? But
Totally.
I think it's a great thing to do, right? It doesn't matter at this point. Every job has controls on it. Every job has controls on it. So it doesn't matter anymore if you're a distributor, if you're a dealer, if you're a rep. It doesn't matter. We're seeing more and more distributors, electricians, and reps doing their own startups and not using integrators. And that's not necessarily a problem. Integrators are there for those really large, complicated projects where you really need that third party that can come in and do what they need to. There are a lot of single source projects, small office buildings, warehouses, where they can very easily be started up by a distributor, the rep, the electrician. There's plenty of opportunities. Most of the stuff is app-based now. It's so easy to do. So I think having a certification is a great thing to do to be able to get more people into the marketplace, right? Because that's been a lot of our biggest challenges is education and a lack of awareness in the marketplace. So being able to really help bring controls more to a NAILD as a distributor sort of organization, I think is a great thing.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to make you my spokesperson, Ron, because you almost ticked all of the talking points in that one spiel. But yeah, I mean that is sort of the thing is like we the way I like to break up the industry when it comes from a sales perspective is into three categories. You've got consumer grade, which is the equipment that you get from the big box stores, and whether or not you know what you're doing, you could probably install it yourself if you follow the instructions closely enough and at least take safety into consideration. But that's the consumer grade level stuff. And then there's on the other end of that spectrum, the specification grade stuff that you're dealing with when you're doing the high end integration, building automation, stuff that Port often deals with, and also stuff that Penumbra often deals with when I get retained to support a project. And so that usually is dealt with on the sales rep, specifier, skilled labor side of things. But there's still that in between, which is what I refer to as contractor grade, where you have, direct sales from wholesalers or distributors to contractors with very little oversight in the regard of having a sales rep or a skilled integrator involved. And so it is kind of at the mercy of the knowledge and skill base of the people in that relationship. And a lot of distributors shy away from those sales because they tend to be the ones holding the bag at the end of the day going, well, we sold you this, so I guess we got to figure it out and make sure that it's going to work. But at the same time, it's also kind of this finger pointing game that turns out where it's like, well, you bought it, so you must know how it works, right? And the contractor goes, yeah, but you sold it to me, so you must know how it works. And so it really becomes this frustration point. And I think it's an underserved community that really should be given an opportunity to step up because, like you said, controls are everywhere at this point. And so that's the focus of this training, is to really up the game in that contractor grade area. Once you start adding a gateway, you're entering specification world, and you're no longer dealing with what
Yep.
I would call contractor grade equipment. It's a onesie twosie room based system or something like that, where okay, you have a couple of sensors or a couple of switches and they're communicating to each other, but that's the extent of it. You're just trying to meet energy code or some simple control scheme. um, and so what this training does is it creates an ecosystem for that
Hmm.
area. We've got an ecosystem in the specification world. We've got reps, integrators, designers, but we don't really have that ecosystem in the distributor and contractor area. So what it is it's a 3-track training, and you get to pick one of the tracks because they're going to be given at the exact same time to different attendees. So you're going to have the designer track, or the lighting specialist, controls specialist, LSCS track, which is really going to be about, okay, how do you design a system? And it is sort of from the perspective of a distributor where,
Hmm.
let's say, for instance, somebody comes to a distributor and says, I need a lighting control system. I don't know what I need, but I need something. The distributor could then say, okay, well, give me what you have for information, and let's come up with a solution for you. And that's sort of the idea with the design track. Then there's the sales track, which is for those distributors that really don't sell lighting controls right now, but want to get into it. And it's not just for distributors. It could be for sales reps. It could be for showrooms. It could be for anybody who wants some kind of certification that really makes sure that, like, okay, you get the stamp that says, yes, I know what I'm doing, which is a great resource for people on their resume. But the sales track really is about, okay, what products should you have in stock if you're a distributor? How do you
Mm.
sell a product? How do you talk about a product to a client to make sure that they get the information they need to make that sales decision? And so there's a lot of skill and trade going into that. It's the LSCD, the lighting specialist in controls design, distribution. And that's one of the challenges, is design and distribution have the same letter. So we went with LSCD for the distribution side of things. And then the last one is LSCI, Lighting Specialist Controls Installer, which is tying that up at the end. We're seeing a lot of support needed, like you mentioned, in the installation and programming of
Yep.
these systems, where you need to do a startup. Yeah, okay, fine. You bought a switch and a sensor. How do you make sure that they work? Well, you got to program them. If you don't know how to program it, then who do you call? Well, you might be able to call the hotline, but the hotline is only going to be so capable because they're telling you over the phone. So having that local support through the distributor that you purchase the equipment might be a benefit to the project. And additionally, the distributor can be that support line for ongoing support. And so that's what the installer track is really focusing on, is how to install, start up, and support these contractor grade equipment. And the benefit, the real bow on this, which I'm really happy about, is that we have a number of brands that are already saying, yes, we will endorse this. We will
Nice.
actually say that if you get this certification, either the design, distribution, or installation track, you are a certified brand X installer, designer, distributor, and we will 100% support and endorse that. And so we're working closely with these brands to make sure that the trainings align with their own needs and requirements of their systems, so that when you walk out that door, when you pass the proctored exam at the end, you will be able to say, yes, I can do this. And that's something that I don't really see a lot in this in trainings. We see a lot of trainings that will say, okay, you'll be good, but not
Right.
backed by any particular brands or supported. And that's the unfortunate reality that we live in with lighting controls right now, is that you kind of need to align with the brand.
Yeah.
You're either going to pick brand X or brand Y to sell, design to, install, because every brand is different in North American market. So that's the thing. That's kind of, again, the little bow on the top of all of this, is that you get that backing and support, and we will have product examples and people from these companies at these trainings doing hands-on. And so The schedule for this training, we're going to have 3 2-hour webinars leading up to an in-person um, couple of days class, and then a proctored exam on the last day. And so you'll have to attend all 3 webinars, but the webinars are just to give you a baseline of information so that everybody coming into these classes in person share the same knowledge, share the same information. And then we're going to have the 3 tracks in person at the Dallas Market Center right before Light Ovation in June. And so that's the really nice thing, is that if you're going to Light Ovation already, just scooch your attendance date a couple days before, and you'll get to attend this. And then the proctored exam is on the first day of Light Ovation. And so, once you're done with your exam, you can just go right into Light Ovation and go to the show. If you're not, no worries. But the nice thing is that the Dallas Market Center is a really accessible location. There's a lot of hotels, a lot of, maneuverability within the city. And so it's really a great opportunity. Additionally, if you've never been to the Dallas Market Center, it has permanent show floors for a number of brands already there. So you can kind of go in and check out products that you might not be aware of or familiar with after you're done with the training, or we might even have a tour. We're still fine tuning the schedule for this, but that we are anchored on these dates. We're going to have a link in the description, and so that way you can check it out. And also with this announcement, we're announcing a pre-registration for this. So if you are interested in this, it's not a commitment. It's just saying, yes, I am interested in attending this. Please sign the pre-registration, because you will make sure that once we go to full registration, you'll get information immediately. That will probably come out in early 2025. But, we've got a really great team right now for the trainings. Anybody who has listened to this podcast before will be familiar with these names. Darren Lapsley, who is going to be heading the sales side or the distribution side of this training. He has his own company, Mamaluke, and we should actually have him on this show soon to talk about his company that he founded. But he really is a fantastic resource for educating people on how to do sales. And then Chris O'Shea, who has his own company, Control Force, and he's going to be in charge of the installation, and I'll be in charge of the design track. So with the 3 of us, I really think that it's going to be a fantastic resource for anybody who's interested in attending this, who want to step into lighting controls in the distribution and contractor grade world. If you're, a specifier and you want to up your game, please come. If you're, a DIYer and still want to, learn more and step into the world of more permanent installation, or getting a job in this, it's certainly an opportunity. But right now we are certainly more focused on the distribution side or the contractors. But the more the merrier. We definitely want to make this an opportunity for people to learn and leverage that resource.
Cool. It sounds like you've already kind of got marketing brochures you didn't even realize you had, right? 3, 2, 1. 3 webinar sessions, 2 hours apiece, 1 in-person proctored test. 3, 2, 1. Right? You've already got your own brochures. You didn't even realize it.
You're right.
So I have to ask, where it's only 3 2-hour sessions, it's not a lot of time. That's a lot of information to cram at people. And so I'm assuming there's not going to be much of this, because this is what I was really curious about is there any cross between those 3 tracks, right? Between sales and design, installation and design. I think those ones kind of make the most sense to me too, right? Because like when you're getting into the installation, you need to have some understanding of the design aspect to really wrap your head around the install. And then same thing when you're selling it, you need to have an understanding of the design and how the components go together in order to properly sell a system, like to really make sure that you're giving people exactly what they need. There are so many different components and options, and especially when you start getting into emergency loads and this and that, and there's so many different parts and pieces to have to understand all that. 6 hours is it's not a big commitment. It's also not a lot of time. So how are you dealing with that?
No, it's an excellent question, and you're right. I mean, 6 hours really isn't a huge amount of time, and so there is going to be overlap within the three tracks, at least if you're looking at it from a 10,000-foot view. But when you really get into the minutia, okay, yes, a salesperson does need to understand how design works, but they don't need to understand how to design. They need
Right.
to understand how things connect, but they don't
Yep.
need to necessarily draw one line showing that connection. So there is going to be, at least from a broader perspective, overlap in these 2 days of in-person training. But really what it is it's going to be, okay, what do you as this specialist in this track need to think about when it comes to this? Because, from what I've seen, at least, and I hope some of my colleagues listening to this are going to correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of education out there for lighting controls is from the perspective of the designer.
Mm-hmm.
It's infrequently, at least unless it's like a brand specific training where you go to the factory and you learn specifically about this product, it's less about the installation and the sales of that product and more just about, okay, how does the system work? And then it's up
Mm-hmm.
to you to figure out how to sell it, how to install it. So really, that's the core purpose of this. Is it's not, okay, you're going to know everything walking out of here. It's going to be, everything in your specialization, and then you should lean on your colleagues in the other
Mm-hmm.
tracks to fill in the rest, because that's the point of the ecosystem, is that a designer comes up with the idea and creates the documentation to support a lighting control system. A salesperson makes sure that that documentation goes from idea to reality through the distribution and sales process. And then an installer is going to take what has been packaged through the sales process and delivered to them and put it into place and make sure it actually works the way it was intended. And so there is circle back, you do have to review the documentation the designer gives you as an installer and as a salesperson. And the salesperson needs to communicate with the designer and the installer to make sure everybody's in agreement. And the installer needs to double check everything and say, okay, yeah, this is working as intended. And so there is coordination that needs to happen between the two. And part of the exam is going to be, okay, here's a scenario that you're being given. What do you do? But that scenario is going to be different based on the track you take. So are you a salesperson? Okay, here's the scenario. You're given a blank RCP. Well, I should reach out for a designer and make sure that they fill out the RCP first before I, start doing a takeoff, because without a designer, I can't really do a takeoff. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's part of this whole function here, is like, okay, lean on your colleagues. It's a team effort to get this done. It's not, okay, I'm going to do everything and therefore, I'm going to take the biggest piece of the pie. It's, how do I make this a good solution? Because that's the problem we're in right now, is people have a really bad taste in their mouth when it comes to contractor grade lighting controls, because of the fact that it's not done in a way that results in satisfied end users. It's done in a way that people get really frustrated and are like, you told me this was going to work. And it's like, well,
Right.
yeah, if it was done right, it would work.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a good point. So, out of curiosity, so I understand the idea of having the in-person proctored test and having that at a central location makes a ton of sense. Are the webinars being recorded? And I ask because what I'm curious is there an opportunity for someone to take the sales track, take the proctor test and say, that was great, but now I really want to take the design track, and then be able to pay for that, watch the webinars with the understanding that if, as long as the proctored tests stay in person and it's not, say, a test that you could go take at like an H&R Block or something, right?
Right.
Where that way it's not just, you're not in front of your computer at home, so you can't cheat, right? Is there an opportunity there where someone can then say, yeah, I'm going to pay for this, and then, yeah, I'll take the proctored test next year, but I really want the information in that design webinar. I want that information for myself.
Well, and the live webinars are really going to be everybody attends them. It's going to be more generic information. So if you take the sales track, you're going to get the same live webinar as if you took the design track or the installation track. So that being the case, we don't really need to record those. That is not to say that the material is going to disappear into the ether. We are certainly looking at other avenues for that. But the idea is that if you've taken this track and you want to take another track, all you need to do is the in-person. You don't need to do the 3 webinars leading up to it anymore. And so we will certainly, if we get enough interest in this, we will certainly come up with more discounted packages for people who are going to be repeat attendees trying to fill out the rest of their certification lines in that. But the hope is that people are really going to stick to the path that makes the most sense for them. And then if they want to really become this holistic expert, maybe then we come up with a second tier of training rather than you having to go back through these again and again. But that's we're talking 5-10 years out from now. Really, we're in its infancy with this training, and hopefully we're going to see some commenters about this on this episode as well, kind of saying, I like this, I dislike this, because it's about feedback too. What I'm trying to do with this training certification is offer something that is currently not being offered to improve the education in our industry. And so, that's why, again, I've reached out to brands to try to get their endorsements. Is like, is this going to support you? And a good number of them have already said, yes, this is a great idea. I love this. Yeah. Let's do this. And so, if there's demand for this, then we can absolutely expand it to cover what people need and want. And so, again, if we have a lot of people who are like, man, I wish I could take all 3, then it's like, okay, well, then we need to spread it out more. We need to have it be, instead of 2 days, 6 days. And it's basically, you can take all 3 and get all 3 certifications all at once. That is a lot, though. That is, in my opinion, trying to do all 3 certifications in 1 week, your head's gonna be spinning by the end of that.
Oh, so, no. Yeah, I agree. That's too much.
I would say definitely we would want to spread it out a little bit more, but at the same time, people who are listening to this, please let me know what you think, because if you think you can power through a week of nonstop intensive training, great. Let's make it happen.
That's a lot for most people. That's a lot, right? I think that the better play is, and that's why I was asking if they were recorded, right? Because then there's the opportunity that you took one track, you really enjoyed it. A couple of weeks later, a month later, you decide, you know what? I'd really like to dip my toes into this second track and be able to go back and watch. So,
and I think, the thing is, I don't want people to just take like an easy breeze through this. Like, this is not going to be your conference trainings or your might be akin to a manufacturer training, but you're not going to walk in and be like, okay, here's the basic information. Like, this is going to hammer you over the head with really intense stuff. And that's the thing that I hear a lot of complaints about. Not saying like, okay, this training was bad, but just this training was too simplistic for what I want. And so it's like, this is for people who, first of all, have limited knowledge of lighting controls, but second of all, who really want to walk into a training experience, and by the end of the experience, when they walk out, they know what they're doing and they know how to deal with lighting controls.
And I you might even be underselling it with the limited experience of controls.
Sure.
Well, I say that because if you have the manufacturers who are backing this and saying, yes, if you have this certification, you can do X, Y, or Z, then it doesn't really matter what level of sort of controls you're in, right? Because you're now going through a training, which, while not manufacturer specific, is being endorsed and backed by the manufacturers as something they approve. So there's a lot more to it, potentially, than just your sort of entry level people.
100%.
And I think it'll be really interesting to see how many manufacturers you guys can get on board and really get behind this, because I think you're right. people shouldn't expect to just waltz into this. It's going to be more like an in-depth manufacturer's training, but obviously, broader, right? Because it's going to cover multiple disciplines.
Right.
But it's going to have that same level of information and knowledge base, and you're going to need to take notes. And I don't know if there's any hands-on at all with some of this, but
Yes, absolutely. You have to have
Yeah.
hands-on with lighting controls.
So, I mean, there's going to be a lot
from your
to it.
experience, Ron. I mean, when you learn about a new product, like if you weren't given the product to hold in your hand, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I need to play with it, right? Because I need to break it.
Yeah.
I need to understand.
Right, exactly.
What you tell me it can do all of these things, but I really see an application where I could do this. So I want to try and figure out how I'm going to do that. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of that. So I'm constantly trying to break things. A lot of my guys are. It's kind of what we do.
Right.
Just to understand what are our physical limitations, or at what point do I need this other component from this other manufacturer just to make this thing work. Right. So, there's a lot of that, but you have to have your hands on it. You have to be able to, especially when you're starting to get into the design side and the installation side, you need to be able to physically wire that switch to whatever device, to the load with the sensor, and be able to program it and understand how it all works and goes together. Because if you just sit there and listen to somebody preach about it, you're not going to get a full understanding of it as you are if you can physically put your hands on it and do it yourself.
I 100%. And that's the thing. And I would say even with sales, like, as a salesperson, when I was working in sales, I had to build little mock-ups. And if I didn't understand how my device is connected, I couldn't have done that. And that's not to say that, you have to build mock-ups for every single time you're selling something, but you do have to think holistically about how the system works so that if somebody asks you that random question, you don't go, I don't know. You really do have to be prepared to answer those questions as a salesperson. And so through and through, I mean, the ecosystem, it's going to be shared knowledge, but it's going to be specific to what your goal is with that information, not so much just the root information.
Yeah, I'll give you a very specific example. So like when you're, especially for a sales guy, if you've got someone who comes to you and they're trying to do a warehouse and they've got a bunch of mezzanine space and a bunch of aisles under the mezzanine, and they want motion sensors in each aisle, there are a lot of considerations with those motion sensor placement as far as how far into the aisle before you are picking up people outside of the aisle, so that, when no one's there, the lights are actually going off or dimming down, whatever you want them to do. There are certain manufacturers who make their sensors with magnets on them. And when you're dealing with metal mezzanine, do you know how fantastic it is to say, okay, I've looked at this cut sheet, I've looked at this installation manual, it says I want this sensor here, and you install it, and if people walk too close, maybe it's picking up a large range of motion, and you don't have to unwire anything because it's a Bluetooth sensor, and you just go, eh. It's magic. It's absolute magic, right? Yes. So from a sales perspective, understanding that technology is out there, that there's a reason to use manufacturer A over manufacturer B, because in that specific case, there's no rewiring. You just pick up the sensor and move it out of the way, and all is right with the world. So there's a lot that comes into when you start working through design and sales and understanding the equipment. But you read so many cut sheets, you don't understand that until you physically put your hands on it and go, hey, there are magnets on this thing.
And that brand you're referring to, at least as of this recording, they are backing this. So
fantastic.
I'm not going to name the name, but if you know the brand, but if not, there are definitely going to be resources like that in this training, like that example right there. And to think about the ecosystem, maybe the salesperson is the point of contact for that client, where they say, yep, hey, we need sensors under this mezzanine. And then the salesperson goes, oh, there's like metal down here. We could probably use this system. They're not going to do the documentation, but they are going to make that connection and say, okay, this is this brand's system. go to the designer. Hey, we need this brand system for this space because of X, Y, and Z, and then the designer will create the documentation for that. And that's not to say that the distributor couldn't have all three of these people in house. That's actually, in my opinion, a pretty good idea, because then you have
Sure.
everybody under one roof. You can
Yep.
design, sell, and install the whole system without leaning on anybody else. But if you're a small distributor and you really don't have the resources, we're going to have a list of all these people. Hey, I need a designer. Oh, here's a designer who's nearby. Great. Let's tap them and get them involved in this. We also need an installer. Oh, okay. Let's go to the list of certified installers. Great. Okay, we've got our complete party here. We've got our bill of material ready to go. So that's really the role of the salesperson in this regard, is making that connection. That's not to say this is going to be how it goes every time, because in this contractor grade world, it really does kind of go a little bit more ad hoc, a little bit looser in how these projects develop over time. But if you think in the mindset of this ecosystem, that's the benefit of this, is that you can really leverage these resources that you have available to you. So it's not just you. Hey, I noticed this whole thing with the metallic thing and the magnets and all that. And the designer goes, yeah, but you're missing this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. So it becomes a conversation. It's a really great resource for collaboration. But yeah, to your point, Ron, like that is why you want to get your hands dirty with all this stuff. And so that's why it's so important to do this in person, and why it's so important to not just have death by PowerPoint throughout all of this, but have real practical workshopping, making people struggle through the challenges of handling this material, and also trying to break it. That's one of my favorite things to do too, is like, okay, if somebody hands me a product, I'm going to try to break it, and not in the sense of like, okay, it's irreparable, but in the sense of like, okay, where are the ins and outs of this? What's the limitation of
Yep.
this capability? I mean, okay, let's say it's magnetic. What happens if I put it near something that's sensitive to magnets? Okay, that's a really important thing to think about. And so it's just all of these things that Ron and I usually do when we're learning stuff. And that's the other thing about this training certification, is that I like to come from a perspective of heuristics, which is tools for learning. It's not just that I'm going to hand you a tool and say, okay, there you go. It's how do you use this tool? And then by understanding how you use that tool, you can expand upon your knowledge and really go further. So the idea here is that this is a foundation. Why I like to say new to lighting controls is because that's the idea. If you're a vet in lighting controls, this certainly is a great resource still for you. But you kind of need to come in with the mentality of, okay, I maybe I don't know as much as I do know. If somebody comes into this training thinking they know everything there is to know, I don't personally want you there. Like that, like if you already know everything there is to know about lighting controls, why are you taking this training? As far as people that I want to come to this, I want people who are desiring knowledge, desiring information, really wanting to enter this world or step up their game in lighting controls. And so that's the feedback that I'm going to be looking for from this as well, is did this teach you something? If you didn't learn anything from this, I'm going to feel terrible, because I'm going to feel like I didn't do my job well. If you walk away from this training going, yeah, no, there was nothing there and it was really boring and nobody taught me anything new, really, I'd feel awful.
Well, at least with Chris and Darren there, people around to learn something, right?
For sure. No, if you have not listened to the episodes that we've had them on, please check them out. They're really wonderful people, and I'm really happy to have them on as a team. That's not to say they're the only people who are going to be there. We're going to have plenty of other people. Hopefully, Ron, you're going to be there with us. But we're really just getting going with this. We're announcing the pre-registration, as I mentioned. So if you're interested, please let us know. We want to know if there's interest for this. If there's not interest for this, well then, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what we missed. But even if you're like, yeah, it'd be a cool idea, but I don't have any time or money for this, still pre-register. Let's talk. Reach out to me. Send me an email. Like I love talking to people about this stuff, and so by all means, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. So, all right, real quick, let's talk about
Yeah.
resources because you mentioned them.
Yes.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the tracks and how they're going to be beneficial, but you mentioned creating a list. So, let's talk
Yeah.
about some of the resources that are going to come out of this training. So, it sounds like you're going to have on NAILD's website a list of people with through these various certifications, names,
Yes.
locations, companies. So, if you're looking for someone near you, you can find that person, or you have a job in Orlando and you want to find somebody down in that area. So let's talk some more about that.
Yeah. So I mean, the impetus for that is to have a holistic list, and what that looks like is still kind of being designed right now. But the core focus, like you mentioned, name, location, skill, certification, whatever it is that we're going to list it as, so that you can quickly identify them. Since it's going to be for a broad group of brands, you don't have to search by brand.
Mm.
You can assume that if they have the certification, they are trained in this brand, and they can take care of you. So the idea here is, let's say, for instance, you're an ESCO and you're trying to get that energy rebate for lighting controls. Find a designer. First thing first, get a designer on your team. And so there will also be sort of like, step by step, like, I'm in this stage of the project. Who should I contact? Resources for people looking for these kinds of resources. But additionally, internally, it's going to be, okay, I'm a distributor. I need a designer. I need an installer. Go to the list, get somebody involved. The pricing of the service is still up to how the person wants to price their services. We're not going to regulate that. We're not going to control for that. So, I mean, if you really want to be the cheapest game in town, by all means, go for it. But we will talk about what average pricing for services looks like in the industry, so you're not shooting yourself in the foot by doing something outrageous. But the support there is really for this internal ecosystem to operate on its own, and then we will eventually have oversight of this. The ideal here is that we're going to have supporting resources for these people. You're going to have to do CEUs. You're going to have to renew this over time because technology changes, lighting controls especially.
Yep. Yep.
And so we want to make sure that you're staying current with your information. So this certification is going to track for a long time. And additionally, we're hoping to align the curriculum in a way in which you can take certifications that are adjacent to this. We're not endorsing, we're not saying support right now, but the idea is that there are other lighting control certifications out there, and we certainly don't want to step on their toes. We want to support them because those are also amazing certifications that you should definitely check out. But these sorts of resources, we want to make sure that they're bolstered and supported. And so the Council on Lighting Control Startup and Integration eventually, I would imagine, would start supporting especially the installer track, to make sure that we are shoring up those people and making sure they have the support they need. But again, it's easy enough to envision what this is going to look like in the future. It's harder to actually know what it's going to look like because it really depends on how the industry responds, how outsiders respond to it.
Yep.
So I mean, we're going to try to adapt with what the feedback we get is. And so if people are like, this is garbage, this database online, I can't find a single thing that I need. It's like, okay, great. Let's fix it. Let's make it better.
Yep. Yep. Are there other resources or benefits to like NAILD members that they should be aware of as you're getting through this?
Well, we're going to have a discount for NAILD members, number one, as well as LCA members. So anybody who is a member of either will be able to get a discount on this training experience. But we will also offer resources at this. So we're going to have like a thumb drive full of files that you can take advantage of. And we're going to make sure that, again, by the time you walk out, you might not have everything in hand, but you'll at least have like a shopping list of things that you should purchase and have on hand. So like, for instance, if you're a designer, you should probably consider getting Bluebeam as a software. We're not going to give you the license for Bluebeam, but you should absolutely, consider getting it and using it because we will be training on Bluebeam and we'll be handing out in that thumb drive Bluebeam resources for you to use. So that's an example of something that you'll have. But the good thing is that you'll know what you need. So you don't have to go, okay, well, should I get, Adobe Acrobat or should I get Bluebeam? It's like, no, you should get Bluebeam as a minimum. I mean, Adobe Acrobat is great too, and I'm not talking smack about them, but we will be training specifically on Bluebeam as a platform. So that's just something to consider. But you'll get those resources as the course as you go through the trainings and everything. You should absolutely have a laptop with you. That is going to be a number one requirement, because we are going to have you do stuff on your computer. So if you do not have a laptop and you still want to attend, please, when you do the pre-registration, just say, hey, I'm not going to have a laptop. And that's really good information for us to know, because maybe we need to have laptops at the ready for people to use. We're not going to be doing powerhouse software. We're not going to expect you to have the latest RTX graphics card on your laptop. It can be a very minimal laptop, but it can't be like a Chromebook or anything. It has to have recommended Windows, but I believe you can still get away with Mac for what we're planning here. But by all means, you're going to want that laptop if you don't have one.
And are you saying you're going to need, during the webinar, obviously you're going to need something to connect to the internet with for the webinars, but are you saying that you're going to need a second machine during the webinar, so you can have the webinar open on one and then be able to work on software on another?
No, if the webinars are going to be much more PowerPointy and just trying to get you the basic information that you need to understand, because there's so much terminology in our industry, and some of it's inconsistent, and so we just want to make sure that there's a baseline when you walk into those classrooms. So there's no well, I thought you said that this was 0 to 10 volt, and it's like, well, okay, there's 3 0 to 10 volts, but I want to make sure that everybody understands foundational information first, and then when they get into the classroom, that's when it becomes more specialized. And so the 3 live webinars are going to be more, you can sit back, relax, have a cup of tea, and watch them. But the in-person ones are the really intensive ones, the ones that are really going to require a lot more participation.
Nice. Awesome. I mean, it all sounds fantastic. And I'm sure we'll have more conversations about this as it sort of flushes out and gets closer. And like you said, if we have Chris and Darren on as well to talk about it and talk about the different tracks and really sort of be able to dive in and give people more information as it gets closer. But I think it's great. I think, there's there doesn't sound like there's any cost to pre-register, right?
No cost to pre-register. There is going to be a cost to actually register and participate. But pre-registration is just, again, you putting in some basic information about who you are and which track you're interested in attending. And outside of that, we'll just let you know when we're actually ready for you to put your credit card down. But, right now, again, we just want to make sure that this is in alignment with what people want.
Do you have to be a NAILD or LCA member to pre-register? Is this like an open website where you can just register?
This is going to be a wide open. We're going to have a link in the description if you want to click on it. But we'll also have resources on NAILD's website and also through the training link that is on our Lighting Control podcast website. But yeah, I mean, there are no requirements for you to pre-register right now, except for you having a computer and you can type in information. So
really, if you're free on those dates and available to go to Dallas, there's nothing stopping anybody listening right now from pre-registering for the event.
Correct.
So there you go.
So, yeah, if you don't pre-register and we're full up because of pre-registrations, that's on you.
Yeah. So you're telling people they should pre-register so that if the classes do fill up before registration even opens, so it's worth certainly just putting down the information. There's no cost to anybody. So put down the information and just to be able to learn more about it as it gets closer to see if it is the right fit for you and your organization.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you don't know right now, and neither do I, honestly. So, we're developing this. We want to see who's interested in this, and whether or not this is going to be the right fit for you in the future, please at least put your name down. I'd love to see who is interested in this and whether or not, like, if we get 0 people registering for this, then I'm going to be like, okay, I really have a bad idea of what's going on here.
I don't think that's going to be an issue here. I really don't. But no, I think it all sounds great. We'll definitely give people more information as it comes out. We'll have Darren and Chris on to talk about their different tracks as well, so that we can provide people the information on what to really expect and what they're really going to get out of these classes, so that they can get the benefit from it and understand exactly what they're signing up for. So no, Webster, I think it's great. I really look forward to, having more conversations about it. It was kind of fun to kind of come into this cold and be more sort of the interviewer, not really knowing everything about this. I think it was great. It allowed us to have a better conversation, I think, because I got to ask the questions as someone who is maybe interested in attending, right?
Totally.
Like, these are some of the thoughts that would come in. So yeah, no, I think it's great. The description and the link is going to be in there. So go ahead, pre-register, get ready. This thing's coming to Dallas. Any other thing you want to tell us before we close out?
Just, reach out again. Like, I love talking about this stuff. If you have an idea for what we should do with trainings, also reach out. Like, anybody who has talked to me, I hope they will say the same thing, is that, like, I'm happy to hear anybody's opinions and ideas. Like, there's no such thing as a bad idea or a bad opinion. There are certainly opinions I disagree with, but I'll certainly hear it out.
Cool. That all sounds great. So we'll definitely have more on about this, as it gets closer, and we'll have more information for everybody. But yeah, if you have questions, reach out to Webster. He can direct you to the right people, whatever you need. But I will close this out and remind everyone, today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes as well as information on this training if you click on the training button. But other than that, thank you so much for joining, and hopefully I will see you at this training.